Jordan. Please help me welcome Dr. Arielle Jordan.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Of
Let's
course.
get into the conversation. Your books, we're going to be talking about your books today. The two books, very interesting books. I, I can recommend anytime.
Awesome. I love to hear that.
Yeah. One of the things that I find interesting in the book is the nickname that you got, Queen of Walking Away. A friend made a T-shirt for you, and another friend also admired the name. How did you come about this name?
um, I think over the years, in my personal life, I will walk away from anything that doesn't serve me. So that could be a relationship, a job. It really doesn't matter what the situation is. If I realize that I'm in a toxic situation, then I have no problem. I'll try a couple things to maybe troubleshoot, but then I'm going to find another way. So if it's a relationship, I'm going to say, you know what, we did our best. Let's move on. If it's a job, I'm going to say, okay, you know what, this actually isn't working for me anymore. I'm going to find something better that does work for me. So
Wow.
I earned that nickname because I just don't tolerate much stuff.
Yeah. Wow. Well, let's get into it. Since you mentioned a relationship, walking away. There's a portion of your book that I really found very interesting. A quote from your book: "If I am going to do everything myself, I will be by myself."
Yeah. Yeah, that was from my marriage. I felt like I was taking on all of the responsibilities at one time. And I kept thinking, it's going to get better, it's going to get better, and it did not get better. So I gave it, as much time as I had in my heart to give. And after that, I decided that it was better off. I was better off to do things by myself because that's what was happening already.
Wow, interesting. So for me, there are two ways to look at that. The first thing is, if you didn't make that statement, if you didn't express yourself the way you felt using those specific words, because words are very powerful. Do you
Hmm.
think the situation would have been different?
Nope. I didn't make that statement until I was sure.
Okay, so that statement is based on what has happened over and over again. I was like, okay,
Hmm.
this is actually how I feel. Because on the other side, I've seen people who are in relationships who their partner probably said something that's more powerful and more stronger than that.
Hmm.
I, I've known people like that. Even my wife have made a statement that's stronger than that and followed up with actions and whole very heated arguments.
Yeah.
And I've still been married for 10 years. And looking back,
Mhm.
my question is, do you feel that there were things that happened before that it seems that that statement was just opening the door for him to go? He already made a decision to go before. Do you feel
Yeah.
that way?
I didn't share my whole story because I didn't feel like that was important to share all of the details. In this book, we're not talking about my marriage. We're talking about losing my child and my father and my divorce. So I didn't go into details about that story because that's a story within itself. But the pattern of leaving was already there. So by the time that I got to that point, it was time.
It
It
was
was
time
just
to go.
it was just the end of something that needed to end.
Wow, wow. So it was just so I can confirm that it was just you just that statement just opened the door for him to go. He already made a decision to go already. So
Yeah, it
so
was
that
just
was
it was already broken, so
yeah,
it wasn't the statement that broke it.
good, good. And also very related to that, a statement from your book again,
Mhm.
from Cardi B this time, not from you. Just to be clear for the audience. So the statement says, yeah, he cheats, but what am I going to do? Get with another man that cheats on me? That's from
Yeah,
Cardi B.
She
So
said that at a concert that I went to, and I was like, oh no, that's not a good mentality to have. I mean, I like her, I'm a fan, but also I just think like that way of thinking can be harmful.
yeah, in a long time, especially if you and and of course we eventually see the way events played out recently. It seems that you were right about that position in your book. All right, we'll leave it at that. Now, based on your own experience with your daughter's dad and other relationships that you've been in, what has changed in your choice of picking romantic partner?
I think healing. It's not you can't make people be who you want them to be. You have to accept them as they are and not how you think they should be. And so I think I've learned more. One, I had to work on myself and any pain that I was harboring. And then I had to move forward and have a more open mind, looking at who are they now rather than the potential of who they could be. And so as I continue my healing journey, I'm just continuing to look at the here and now and the qualities that a person has already rather than what I think they may gain or something like that. Like it has to be reality based.
Wow, that's very important that you brought that up because it seems that there are three options you can judge people with when you meet somebody. You can judge them based on who they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
You can judge them on who they are currently,
Yeah.
or you can judge them on who they could be. And
Mm-hmm.
I can't count the number of times people have met me and say, "Oh, you have potentials," especially in America. Sometimes I don't understand what it means. So later on, I figured out that they're probably trying not to judge me based on who I am now.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to judge me based on who I can be.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
So for you, where do you lean? Which side do you lean to? The before, the current, or the future?
I think it's best to stay in the current. We all have a story of where we came from. And I think that along the way we grow. So if I'm looking at today's me, it's different than it was 10 years ago. If I'm looking, I can't look at tomorrow's me, but I can hope for that. I can plan for that and, continue to strive to be the best I can be. But all we have is this current moment.
Wow, live in the moment, be intentional.
Hmm.
That's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. Thank you for sharing that. So another story that is very clear, that is very emotional from your book is at age of 20, you found out that you were pregnant. And how did that feel? And what was the first emotion that came to your mind? What was the first thing that came to your mind? What was the action? What what did you want to do? What did you think was the solution, the first step that you should take at that point?
For me, finding out was just a shock. I knew that there were some changes in my body that I felt that didn't feel normal. So my first thing was to call my best friend and get some advice from her because she was already a mother. And she gave me advice and I talked to her and then I took a test and saw that it was official. And then the next thought was I have to notify my parents because I wouldn't want anyone else to notify them. So that was the first thought that I had of let me call them and have a conversation with them.
Wow, that's very powerful. That means you're very matured at that age to be able to think that way. Most people will probably not think that way. Wow,
Yeah,
thank you for sharing that.
I'd rather run to the problem rather than run away from it. So that's how I think.
Wow, because then you can quickly think about the solution if
Hmm.
you run to the problem. Because running away from the problem doesn't mean the problem is going away.
No, and actually sometimes it gets worse when you do it that way.
Yeah. Wow, that's the first lesson. I hope our viewers are taking note of that. So based on your experience now, I give you a background to that. I'm from Nigeria, West Africa, all right? And it seems that dating is not a popular thing where I come from, and it's not really supported by parents. And my mom would say that whatever you're not going to put in your mouth, you don't put close to your nose. That's an idea of dating. But it seems that this is America. People are open to things like that. Even teenagers, people go to prom and they get their first kiss in a prom and things like that. My question to you is this, which is something that I'm trying to like understand in a new environment. My question to you is this: based on your own experience, what would your advice be for people who are trying to date and as a teenager at that young age now? What would you say to them?
I guess I would say take your time. There's a lot of life to live, so you don't really have to rush. As to in your mind, you may think that that's the thing to do, or this is all I have, you know. But typically, we have a long life to live, so we don't have to do it all right now. You know, you can focus on things that are the priority for right now, and it's okay to have fun, but also, everything in moderation.
Wow. Well, but then, so if you want to personalize that, what would you have done differently if you had the opportunity to go back? I know that sounds like a table topics question, but in Toastmasters. But then, if you had the opportunity to go back and just with everything you know now, all right, you go back to your 16 years, what would you do differently?
I don't think I would do it differently. I mean, I feel like there's a lot that I learned. We're talking about, if you're talking about age 16, that's when I graduated high school. And I made the decision shortly after to join the military. And even though experiences weren't great, I still think it definitely made me who I am. So I think in the way that I think, I wouldn't go back and change it. I think that that's a piece of the puzzle that I don't want to take out, you know?
Wow, that means you love playing puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. That's good. Puzzles are fun. So there's so many emotional stories in your book. One of the story that I also find very interesting, when you found that you were pregnant and they were trying to determine the sex of your baby.
Mm-hmm.
What walk me through the whole process? What were the emotions around those, and what were the conversations, and whatever you're willing to share?
Yeah, so it was just a challenging time. I didn't really know what to think. Let's see, I was 21 at that time, and yeah, I didn't know what to think. My daughter had an extra chromosome, and so I'm not sure exactly what happened or how that mistake can be made, but I had a test where they took a piece of the placenta, and that's where they thought that her chromosomes were um, XXY, and that's Klinefelter syndrome. So I started to read more about what that is, and it's basically a male that is feminine. And obviously, that's the very, very dumbed down definition. There's way more to it, but from what I understood, I was like, okay, I'm having a boy that is going to have feminine traits because of their genetics. So I'm wrapping my head around just how to raise a child like that, and I kept getting the question of whether I wanted to terminate or not, and that was never a thought at all. I was just like, well, how do I prepare myself for this? So it was very confusing. And then when I got to the actual ultrasound where they show you the baby, she was a girl. And so there was a lot of confusion within the genetics. And then I got like genetic counseling and things like that. And they really didn't know until after she was born. They said that piece of Y looked, the piece that looked like a Y was actually a trisomy 15 chromosome. And I asked them, what does that mean for her? And they said that, well, she has, all her fingers, all her toes, she looks healthy. We usually see this in miscarriages. And I was like, oh, okay, that was breathtaking because the day I had her was an emergency. She had stopped moving that morning, and I went to the doctor. So I think had I not been in tune with my body, that I might have lost her that day. So she was actually born at 7 months instead of 9 because she stopped moving and went to the hospital, and my blood pressure was over 200. So it actually was like a life or death type of situation during that time.
Wow, interesting. And based on what you reported in the book, it feels that the doctor felt was a life-threatening situation for both of you and the child, and they had to ask you, do you want to terminate the child at that time? But then in a recent event, how would you I don't even know what to ask. how how do you think that kind of question will change now based on the way people are feeling about the child care and motherhood at this particular stage of life?
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea, but just thinking about it, like that was never an option for me. I never wanted that. But, it does make me wonder for the people that, let's say, it's going to be a terminal illness, because I didn't know that my daughter was going to have a terminal illness. The only thing I knew was what I knew during that time period. It wasn't until she was 3 months that I knew she had a terminal illness. But I wonder, for the people that are facing those decisions, what they would choose, or now, what options they have. So it's not for me to say, but
Yeah.
from my experience, I was like, okay, well, how do I prepare? What can I learn from this?
Wow, interesting. Interesting. But if you had known, if they have explained to you it was a terminal sickness, would that have changed your decision?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, I mean, even when she was diagnosed with pulmonary vein stenosis, um, from the research, there's no cure even today. But my thought was, what can I do? And
Mhm.
so I found Boston Children's Hospital, and they had a trial study. So I said, how do I get in the trial study? Because I was going to do everything that I could do anyway. So that's that's the train of thought that I had, is like, what can I do? You know. So I don't regret anything. I did the absolute best that I could. I did everything that I could, and I know, in my heart, at least that sits well.
Wow. Thank you so much. In the midst of all these, there's a portion in your book. I have to show it a couple of times. Your book that you wrote this quote there. I realized my walls were not boundaries, but tricks grief played on me.
Mm-hmm.
What was going on your mind when you were feeling that way? What was the emotions behind that?
Repeat the quote.
He said, I realized my walls were not boundaries, but tricks grief played on me.
Okay. Sorry, it had broke up for a second. Yeah, I said they were tricks that grief played on me.
Yes.
Yeah, so when you're grieving and everything feels so heavy, you can put up walls and not let anybody in. And then I think for me, what happened was the wrong person got in. So I was like, oh, okay, so how did that happen? I'm going back and I'm reflecting, and I'm like, oh, okay, there was just so much sadness that when I got a little glimpse of something, positive, I thought like, oh, okay, I got to run towards this. And it's not necessarily true. So you have to be mindful that you're in a vulnerable state when you're grieving. So the choices that you make are from that vulnerable place. And so that's what I've learned. And that's why I wrote that, because I was like, oh, okay, this is like a trick here. I didn't give myself enough time, I think.
Yes. So maybe probably waiting for some time before you get into another relationship, things like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the very closest sayings that I've heard people report around that is people said, don't make a permanent decision when you're having a temporary feelings or emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something I try to think about, because once you make a permanent decision, the emotions will go away.
Absolutely.
But then you made a permanent decision already. You can unmake that,
Mm-hmm.
because that's made already. You made that decision already.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to remember. And I kind of wish that it was taught at an earlier age for a lot of folks, because if you learn that, you kind of start to cling to it. Wait a minute, is this a temporary emotion? Okay, so then I need to hold off on my decision making right now. Let me take a couple breaths. Let me put this on the back burner for right now, and make a decision about it later when I feel more calm about it.
Yeah. Wow. So you said something that seems very interesting now. You said taught at an early age, like teachings to kids or young adults or teenagers.
Yeah.
Something that you said around there was on vulnerability, being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a concept that people are gradually embracing, but
Yeah.
a lot of people are still trying to stay away from that. Like, why would I share something with somebody I don't really know about, and in hopes that we could get along? So, do you think this should be taught in schools, and how, or should it be taught in a formal or informal environment? How can the concept of being vulnerable be introduced to people in a more acceptable way?
Yeah. I think that it would have to, I mean, it would have to have some boundaries, like, yes, we can be vulnerable, but there's some people who are too open, there's some people who are too closed. How do we find that middle ground where we need to be? And I think it takes trial and error to do that. But even maybe like basic emotions, like what we're supposed to feel, that's, you feel what you feel. There are no supposed to's. However, your behavior is what you can control. And I think that if it's introduced that I realize I'm giving too much, then I just have to learn what my limits are. And I learned that by trying stuff, So unfortunately, there's no like easy way to do that. But I think just kind of normalizing that we're gonna have a range of emotions. We do need to know what our limits are though, so we can set our boundaries. If I feel like I've done too much, I might feel resentment. So then I have to ask, why do I feel resentment? Oh, it's because I've given too much. So next time, let me do something different so that I don't feel the same feeling.
Wow, interesting. I mean, something very close to that is the fact that people have said that you cannot always say I want to be myself around people, especially people that you don't really know very well, because they can judge you in a way that is not accurate.
Yeah.
And it's very important to think about that. So in your own case, you've been very vulnerable about the story of your daughter. You wrote in the book, and you have posts that I've seen on your social media sharing a story.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, how have you been able to like keep up with bringing our memories, and having a, what do you call it, a way to make sure that you keep her alive in
Mm-hmm.
your mind? How have you been able to do that?
Well, I think about her every day. So that's just a natural occurring thought, that I just miss her. And so I find ways to incorporate her in the things that I do. I know a lot of other people are grieving as well, like this human. They're grieving loss of jobs. They're grieving the death of somebody. They're grieving the death of a dream. So everybody, the grief touches everybody. It's universal. So I know that, and so I use my story to connect with others. I share, little or as much as I'd like, and then that usually does form a connection, and it usually does help someone else. So for me, it's making meaning of those losses rather than letting them take me down or just giving up.
Wow, interesting. In my own experience, I think people just love people whose life is not perfect. Right? If you come across as somebody whose life is perfect, and people just don't like that. But
Hmm.
if you come as somebody who is not perfect, and people can say, "Wow, this
Hmm.
is who this person is. They are not perfect, but at least I know how to interact with them if I have to." I think people just love that.
Yeah, well, I think that like when we talk about perfection, it's just not real. And so if somebody looks or seems perfect, then to me that's a red flag because I don't like that. Like I think that being real is more relatable. And so that tends to draw people in because they're like, "Oh, wait, so you struggle too sometimes, huh?" Absolutely, because we all do.
Yeah, yeah, which is very real. So in all this, in specifically the loss of your daughter, how has it shaped your view of life?
Um, I think that I appreciate the smaller things more, each and every moment because we don't know our date or our time. You know, if somebody, if their expiration date is in their 40s, you know, they may not have a lot of time left as to somebody's expiration dates in their 80s. You know, we just don't know. And because we don't know, I think it's taking every moment and really making the best of that, you know, meeting ourselves where we are and then continuing to move forward. So for me, it's literally a daily practice of okay, what do I want to do today? What can I accomplish today? Do I need to rest today? You know, I'm just kind of checking in to see what I need. And I think I prioritize self-care, you know, over things that I don't want to do.
Wow, wow, interesting. So I really like the idea of using. Oh, not really like. I just very different. The idea of saying, "Wow, if somebody died, expired." That's something I started experiencing when I came to America. Because when something expired, I usually think about food.
Oh,
But it's
that's,
kind of like people like use, oh, expired, expired. But yeah, the first time somebody said it, you know what I did? I just went back to the dictionary to check the meaning of expired again to see if it's been actually used that way. So, but then I see that you're using it that way again, and I really appreciate it.
I think for me, it's a lighter word, you
Yeah,
know,
hmm,
so it's it's received better, you know, to say it
yeah,
that way.
yeah,
Um, depending on the person, right? Like some people might prefer it another way, but I try to just be gentle with my words.
yeah. That's better. That's people. That's why people say people from Africa are too strong. You know how many people have told me I'm too strong? I need to tone it down. I need to tone my blackness down, which is
it's
good.
it's just a cultural difference, right? Like if you go to Nigeria, everybody's probably like that, you know. But as you
Mhm.
come here, they're telling you you're different, and it's like, huh?
Yeah, but it was good. It was a learning moment for me, just going and checking. And I know that in English, actually, there are words that you can use in multiple situations. Right?
Hmm.
So my assumption is that this is the situation. Let me just go back to the dictionary to confirm I know what this person means
Yeah.
in that kind of situation. Right. Thank you so much for sharing that. So one of the quotes from your book that I also like, you said, "I moved from my hometown because my identity was tied to the being that young woman who lost her daughter."
Yeah.
So my question is, was that a good move that you felt was necessary at that point, looking back now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm more than that. And at that time period, I don't think people could see that. So taking a step away and starting fresh in a new environment allowed me to be who I wanted to be. And I could choose to share that part with them, or I could choose to keep that to myself. It wasn't just out in the open for everybody. So it gave me some of my power back that I could still be who I want to be. And then for the people that I want to share this journey with, I certainly can. But for the people that I don't want to, I can protect it.
Oh, good, good. Thank you for sharing that. Now we want to move to that decision to move into the military. All right.
Mhm.
Why did you decide you want to join military at that young age?
I think when I was 16, out of high school, I tried a couple different things that didn't really work. Like I was working at McDonald's and I was like, I don't want to make $8 an hour. 8.25 was like my raise. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Even at 16, I thought like I don't want that. And then I started a CNA program, and then I realized I didn't want to be a CNA. So I was just kind of feeling out stuff. And then I realized that I wanted to get away. And so one of the best ways to do that is to join the military because you know you're going to be taken care of. You know that you're going to have a place to stay and you're going to have some income coming in. You're going to have food. You know, the job is hard, but you don't have to really think too far into like how am I gonna eat? You know you're gonna have food at the end of the day. You know you're gonna have somewhere to lay your head. So that was just that was the extent of my thought process at 16. It was like, okay, I want to get away. You know, I didn't really think it through all the way because that most teenagers don't, right?
Yeah. It's just good. It's a very important decision you made. And your dad had some reservation about that, but you
Mhm.
said, well, I still want to go ahead and do it anyways.
Yeah, he was in Vietnam
Hmm.
and he contracted Agent Orange, and eventually lung cancer took his life. And he was very adamant about the military not being a place for a woman. And I thought he was saying that I couldn't do it. And that's not what he was saying at all. So in the military, there is a lot of like military sexual trauma and things like that. So I think from in hindsight, I think he was trying to say, you know, that he was trying to protect me rather than say you can't do it. So as a rebellious teenager, I'm like, I could do anything, you know, that a man could do, but that's that wasn't the point, you know. And so looking back, I'm like, oh, I see that, you know, it was a protective thing that he was trying to tell me because of his experience in the military and how he got treated when he came back from the Vietnam War. So I get it now, didn't get it then, but I appreciate, you know, what he was trying to do during that time period.
Well, so you mentioned something that seems very interesting about what the man can do, what the woman can do. So that experience you had, does it
Mhm.
impact your thinking about gender differences?
Um, I mean, I know that I just embrace our differences. Sometimes there are things that men can do that women can't. Sometimes there's some things that women can do that men can't. But then you also have some of the things in between as well. So it really is, I think, individualistic, depending on, you know, at least in this culture, right? Um, One of the things I thought was interesting when I went to South Africa, I noticed that we went to visit a tribe. It was like a village, and they were saying like the certain rules and the roles that are played. And I thought it was very interesting because the role of the men was to protect the women. The role of the women was to like make the house and the food and things like that. And I just kind of watched as an American, of course. So one of the things the guy said was when we enter the hut, the women enter in the right, and the women or the yeah, the right, and then the men enter in the left or something like that. And it was because the door swings this way, so the women are protected. If somebody comes in,
Hmm.
men are right there. And I was just like, huh. You know, when it's explained to you, it's like, oh, okay, we can appreciate that for sure. So I think it's just being open to, you know, what can I learn? And I'm always gonna go back to curiosity.
Wow, wow. I think this is a good point to just digress into the election a little bit because of the gender difference we're talking about. So I'll tell you what I know. I know people, I know females who don't see other females as a good leader I know females who don't like to go to a church where the pastor is a female.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, they have some verses in the Bible, because I'm a Christian, to support what they are saying. And my question to you is that, do you think that's a common thing in America? I've never conducted. Do you know any other person that feels that way? And do you think that's also impacted the outcome of the election?
Yeah, I think that sometimes it's a religious belief that women can't lead, or I mean, they can't lead, or they shouldn't be like the pastor or the in the pulpit. You know, sometimes that's a religious belief, and it could come from other things too. But I've seen it as a religious belief. I don't. I mean, everybody has different beliefs, so you kind of have to respect what each individual believes. I don't think there's really a right or wrong answer. I think as a woman who is a leader, I'm absolutely capable of leading. But you know, there might be some people who doubt that, and I'm not here to convince them. I'm here to, you know, stay in my lane, right? Just like the title of your book. I'm here to stay in my lane because I know what I can do, and I'm gonna do it. But I'm not here to convince people who think that I can't. That's a waste of time for me. I'm here to go with the people who know I can. I'm gonna go with them instead.
Yeah, okay, so that's a good idea. Let's not spend too much energy trying to convince people and that. Let's go back to our discussion. So that's still talking about the military experience you had in your book
Mm-hmm.
that are here. You posted an unequal opportunity complaint against the sergeant and endured the hearing of the N word.
Mm-hmm.
What was the circumstances around this? What was the situation that you faced when this happened?
Well, there were several situations that I faced. I chose to put that one in the book because I think that was one of the more extreme instances. But yeah, in my reserve unit, when I switched to the reserves, I got stationed in West Virginia, and it was the most like blatant racism that I've ever experienced. And it just wasn't good. And so it was building up. It was like one thing here, one thing there. And it was so much that kept happening, like little microaggressions here and there, that it was annoying, but tolerable because you can't really say too much when you're the only one in that space. And I was the only one. And so I kept a lot to myself. But one day so I was a culinary specialist, so I was in the kitchen, and there was two parts to the kitchen. So I'm sitting there waiting because there was like nothing to do at that moment. And I heard the other person come in, and they were like talking to another person, and they were angry. And then he used the N word. It wasn't towards me,
Mhm.
but he used it as a verb. Like, I mean, yeah, he used it as a verb, like an ed on the end.
Oh,
And so I was like, that's interesting. So what it was two people of the same rank. Um, like the other person was telling him what to do. And so what he was saying is that he didn't like it. So that's where he used the N word with the ed on the end that he was getting like as a verb. And
wow.
so that was the last straw for me because I had already been through a lot with this unit. And when I filed the EO complaint, um, it was supposed to be confidential, but it was not. And the person actually, the commander actually made the guy like come and apologize
Mhm.
instead of like keeping it confidential. And the apology was, I didn't know you were in the room. It wasn't a real apology.
Mhm.
So and this was from somebody I had to work closely with. So it was a lot of even grief in that time period because there's grief of the camaraderie that I thought I had with this person, but now I know what they really think, you know, on the deeper levels. So now I can't ever look at you the same way. So it was a very interesting circumstance and then just having to stay there after that, you're exposed. You know, it's not confidential.
Wow, wow, interesting. So I mean, that's really bad, especially culturally. It seems that in this environment, things like that is frowned at, which is good. And then I've ever seen anybody using the N word in a verb form before. That's unusual. In Nigeria, I'll tell you for sure, the way the circumstance is very different.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a friend you've seen in a long time, right? You've seen in a long time, and you're excited to see the friend, especially guys, they use the N word to show excitement that you see the person. So coming to America and see that, well, that's actually frowned at. It's part of the cultural changes, and of course,
Yeah. And I was gonna say it can be, right? Like, let's say, am I allowed to cuss?
you can go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna cuss. I just want to make sure. If I'm talking to my friend and I'm like, bitch, I see you, you cute, you're not gonna come up and say that same thing. You know what I
Mhm,
mean? Like it's
mhm.
accepted in certain ways, right? But not everybody can do that. Like,
Yeah.
let's say, you probably call your wife a sweet term
Hmm.
or something like that. But if
Hmm.
another man came up and said that, that's not okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
So we have to be mindful that this exists everywhere, right? Like in our culture, we might say the N word to each other and it's acceptable as to a white person says it, it's not. You
Yeah.
know, we have to keep in mind that that exists across all things, but for some reason, like this is the testing thing here.
Yeah.
But obviously in that moment,
Yeah.
this was racism. As
Yes.
to in your moment, this is me seeing my friend after a long time. I'm excited to see you. That's our turn.
Hmm.
And so there's nothing wrong with it, but I think it's just noticing that there's differences here. We can't do what we want to do in this circumstance here. So it
Hmm.
looks a little bit different.
Yeah. I mean, I usually jokingly explaining to people that in Africa, like I said, you don't care about that. You can use that word if you're excited, and the other person you're using that also understand that this is out of excitement to see you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you come to visit your friends, they instead of asking for permission to use such words, you give them water. All right, but in America, it's like that's their water. That's the water that people are like, yeah, can I do this just like you did, right? So it's like it's very important to see the differences between that and see how that plays out. All right,
Yeah,
so
social awareness. Yeah.
yeah, social awareness, and that's something that we all have to keep working on. So, what is the most challenging part of being in military?
The most challenging part,
Yes.
man, I don't know. Maybe being away, I think, is one of the most challenging parts when you have an assignment or something like that, or you're deployed. You're away for a longer period of time, and life still goes on. So you feel like you're missing out, um, because you are missing out, and so life still goes on without you. So then you come back and you return, and things are different. And I think that's a hard adjustment to the brain when you've been gone for so long. Then you come back, things are different now. You have to adjust to the differences. It's almost like you were dead for a little while and you
Mhm.
came back to life. So I think that's a hard mental adjustment.
Well, so going to come out. Do you think you'll ever go back again?
No.
Why not?
No, I can't. I tore my shoulder and I got surgery, and that's how I got out. I medically retired. So I'm pretty sure there's maybe ways that I could, but there's no reason for me to if I already medically retired and got out, took care of my medical needs and all that stuff. It would be silly to go back in because I could probably damage the same thing or worse.
Hmm. Wow, interesting. So one of the experience you mentioned in the book is the night infiltration course. What was that?
So we call that Nick at Night, and it was very interesting. It's like almost like I guess, a football field, if you can think of a football field, and imagine it covered with sand.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine that some places there's like barbed wire that you have to crawl under. You have to have your full battle rattle. So that's your Kevlar, your plates, your vest, your gun. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I'm missing. I want to say there's some knee pads somewhere too, but it's been a long time. But you are crawling, low crawling on your elbows. So you're on your belly, on your elbows, low crawling, a whole football field. So it's a very, very long night. Or at least it seemed like that to me. It's dark. And then there's guns that are shooting. So you're being shot at. And every fourth round is a tracer. So you can actually see that and at night times. So you can't see, like, there's like 3 bullets or 3 rounds, and then there's a tracer. So you can see the tracer. And so these rounds are like dropping and they're hot. And one got in my collar, and I thought that I was shot.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I completely had a whole breakdown because I thought that I just couldn't do it. And if you think about low crawling on a football field, that's a long way to crawl. I was tired. I was like, I can't do this, and defeat automatically took over, and I just stopped. And there was a drill sergeant that was out there, and he was like, "What are you doing, Jordan?" And I was like, "I can't do this. I'm in tears." And he was like, "Come on, you got this." And he was like, get moving, get moving." And I was like, all right. So I got moving. I saw an ambulance at the end. I was like, oh my God, it's there for me. All these irrational thoughts were coming up, silly. But he called next to me, and I was like, I got over my fear. And then I was able to move again, and I got to the end. And the next day in formation, he gave me his flag to wear. It was like a combat flag. And one of our Army values is personal courage. So he was like, that's an example of personal courage. When you thought you couldn't go longer and you had to like regroup, but then you finished, like that's an example of personal courage because you were scared to death. So that's the Nick at Night story.
Good. Thank you. That's a very detailed story you told there. Thank you so much for sharing that. Something you mentioned earlier today and also in your book is Agent Orange and how that impacted your dad's health. What is that? What is Agent Orange?
Agent Orange is a lung. Well, it can get into your lungs. It's like a chemical that was sprayed. I'm trying to think of it exactly. It's a I think we call it an herbicide that was sprayed during the Vietnam War, and so it ended up causing a lot of problems for these Vietnam vets. And they're noticing, not right then and there, but they're noticing later on that people are having lung issues and there's other things, but several cancers are associated with Agent Orange and leukemia and things like that. So later on, they're starting to see like, oh, okay, there's respiratory stuff going on, there's prostate stuff going on, bladder cancer, and all type of stuff just from that chemical that was sprayed. So it's just unfortunate that obviously they didn't know, I guess, right then and there what it would do, but years later you're starting to see these Vietnam vets have all type of trouble, like liver, pancreas, all type of stuff. So that's what, for anybody that was like exposed to it, it was over 400,000 people during that Vietnam era. So they died from it. So what my dad, he didn't die during Vietnam, but later developed cancer from it, and that ended up taking his life.
Wow, I'm sorry about that. We apologize. So one of the things that I want to know is this military experience that you had, one, how has it shaped your view of life now? Then if you have a loved one, family, friend that's trying to go to the military, what advice would you give to the person?
I hear that the Air Force has a lot of longevity. No, but I think, I don't know. I always hear people in the Air Force for like 20, 30 years and they don't have many complaints. So I would say check out that branch. I'm always going to be an Army girl. So I would just say, be prepared. It's tough. If it was easy, everybody would do it. So, be mindful of the branch that you're picking and that it's going to be challenging. So you need to mentally prepare and physically prepare for that as well. And, just operate with integrity no matter what you choose or what you do. But I think the thing that I would stress most is that it's going to be challenging. There's no way to get around that part of it.
Wow. So people that love challenges at a young age, they're bored. They want something challenging, move away from where they are. Military is always a good place to go.
There's some good stuff that comes out of it. Like when I was 17, I made more money than I had ever made at McDonald's. So that was a plus. I didn't necessarily have financial, intelligence at that time, but so that might be something to learn as well before you go. But yeah, I remember like in basic training, like it was hard. Like we got up very early, being yelled at to run, and you just kind of go with it because that's part of it. You're gonna get yelled at. You're gonna have to run. You're gonna have to push your body to physical extents that you never have before. You're gonna learn a lot of skills that you've never had before, shooting and bow and arrows and things like that. But you just embrace it. You know what you signed up for. Get through it in the best way possible.
Wow, interesting. So I just discovered that other than being a Toastmaster, there's another thing we have in common, which is working at McDonald's, because I also worked at I flipped burger for a couple of times when I first at McDonald's when I first came. That's exciting to know. So based on your work, you mentioned something you call the STARS framework. The STARS framework. What is that?
It's the framework that I kind of go back to over and over again. I guess you would say it's kind of like my method or my values. A lot of times when I'm putting together a professional development training or even personal development consulting or anything like that, it kind of goes back to the STARS. That's self-awareness, rewiring thought patterns, authenticity, practicing radical acceptance, and that's what leads to success. So if you take those steps, the last S of STARS is success. It should equal success if you have self-awareness, change your thought patterns, practice with authenticity, have your radical acceptance, and then you should land on success. So it's kind of like a formula.
Wow, that's very good. So one of the things you also mentioned is the importance of meditation. For people who are not too familiar with meditation, do you have any story of how meditation has actually helped any of your clients or somebody that you know?
Absolutely. I use it all the time, every day, in therapy, in my personal life. It literally is just pausing for a moment to be grounded, to check in with your body. There's so many different types of meditation. You could literally type in YouTube meditation, and there's tons that come up for free, so you can try that. The type that I use is guided meditation. So I'm gonna walk someone through that meditation. So I'm gonna have them kind of just sit for a moment, take some deep breaths because I want them to tap into their calmness. And so when you sit, you pause for a moment, you breathe. Typically, your body feels like, okay, it's a relaxing moment. And then I can walk them through some scenery and say, okay, imagine, there's a stream and it's a flowing water, you know, and then so you're getting your details in the mind of what that stream of flowing water looks like. And then I asked them, add some details to that. You know, are there flowers there? Is the sun shining? Is it warm? Is it kind of chilly? What's your preference? How do you make this place a beautiful place that feels good to you? And as you're thinking about that, maybe there's some leaves that come up on that stream.
Mm.
Are there any thoughts that you want to place on that leaf as it floats down the stream and you kind of let it go? And I can do that, you know, for a while. And what you're doing is you're creating distance from you and that thought. So I might have been thinking, you know, perfectionism or something like that all day long,
Mm-hmm.
but then I put it on that leaf and I watch it float away. And so now it feels less heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can go on about my day. So even just doing that for like 5 minutes is super helpful.
Wow. Wow, interesting. So meditation is something that people should try. I think I probably have to like think about that more and actually do it more. So one of the things you mentioned now is therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And based on your line of work, how impactful is therapy based on the success story from your clients?
I'm super biased, so I think therapy is great. Um, from my clients, I haven't seen anyone not be successful that wanted to be. If somebody comes with their mind made up that this therapy stuff doesn't work, then I wonder why they're there in the first place. You know, I'm like, do you have hope that it's going to work? Do you want to try? And so if they're willing to try and they have like a little curiosity, most of the time they can be successful. And
Mm.
so I have each person set some goals for themselves after I get to know them a couple times. Then we set some concrete goals where they can actually see, all right, so my goal is that anxiety doesn't derail me every single day, that it doesn't impact my daily living. Okay, that's a goal. Then I take it a step further. What will it look like when you achieve that goal? Well, it would look like me going more places. Okay. So when you start to go more places, we know that your anxiety has calmed. And that's how I form the treatment plan with each and every person. And because I do that, we know when we reach some of those goals and need to set new ones or they're done with therapy. So it's all about, you know, really getting to know that person and what their personal experience is, what they struggle with, what some of their challenges are. And then sometimes we need to involve like a medical doctor. They need to go get a checkup because sometimes the medical is playing into the mental. Sometimes people need medication. So they'll go to the psychiatrist. And so it's all a collaborative effort. And we look at it holistically so that people can be successful.
Wow, wow, interesting. We're wrapping up very soon. I still have just one concept of inner child that I want to hear from you. You brought that up, and I've heard of that a couple of times before.
Mm-hmm.
In your own case, how would you describe your inner child?
How would I describe what was that?
Your inner child.
Oh, the inner child.
Yeah.
How would I describe mine?
Yes.
I think she's playful. She likes to play.
Mm.
I think when I'm doing a creative activity, maybe like coloring or playing games or something like that, like I feel it's like it's a jovial feeling, like joy, almost like that inner child is coming out. I saw it a lot with my daughter when I would sit on the floor and like play with her and stuff. I definitely felt my inner child coming out. I see it with my niece when I go play with her. And I think it's important for adults to play. I think we forget somewhere along the line that like we can laugh and we can be silly and we can play too. So how do we do that? Where do we find opportunities for that? And instead of the alternative of, you know, I do so much serious work that it gets heavy. And sometimes I'm like, I need to laugh. I need to watch something, you know, completely ridiculous that's going to have me cracking up. And then I feel better. I feel lighter.
Wow, interesting. So the only last question I have around that is based on your childhood memories,
Mm-hmm.
which of those memories would you say have actually impacted you the most and actually influenced the decisions that you've made?
Well, I think that, so I have trauma from my childhood as well, that I've had to work through. And I think that has impacted me in a way that it kind of made me so strong. And not that you have to have trauma, to be great or anything like that, but I didn't let it defeat me. And so I think from my childhood, it was resilience, that really brought me through, and smarts too. Like I really sat down and read the books and did the work, and I graduated high school at 16. So, there was a lot of like middle ground that I had to find growing up, trying to be the best me. And then you add in the military experiences. I had the resilience to get through all the tough things. And then even now as an adult, it's just like life kept hitting over and over again. So I'm like, all right, so I guess, uh, they say, what are they saying? Uh, you're like God's toughest soldier or something like that. And I'm like, I hope I'm not on the toughest soldier list this year 'cause I'm tired. So, but I think that's what I took from, it's just really the growth and trying to just overcome hard things.
Wow, interesting. We're coming to the end already. These are the books of my guests. Please check it out on Amazon. I've been discussing with Dr. Arielle Jordan. Now we want to wrap up. What would you like to say to our viewers as we end the session?
I hope this was encouraging. I think that I put things out into the world that I want to inspire, and I want people to know that even when life is tough, they can get through. We can do hard things. And so I hope I reinforce that message for anyone watching this.
Good. Thank you so much for being here. It was an exciting time. I learned a lot. There was opportunity to learn and laugh and talk about issues that are very important. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.